My first speaker is Valere Austin Clark, who was born and raised in the Upper East Side of Manhattan. Graduated from Holland University in 1961, enrolled at the Art Students League of New York, and began her life as a painter. 30 years later, Valere moved to the desert Southwest and began restoration efforts at a newly acquired ranch beginning in the 1990s, allowing grazing in the winter months, planted willows and cottonwoods, and installed thousands and thousands of nids. She then founded Cueca Los Ojos Foundation to restore and maintain the grasslands, habitats, and biodiversity in wetland cienagas, and took her restoration efforts even further. So we welcome Valere Clark as our first speaker.
A car ran over my glasses yesterday, so not going to read my notes. Cuenca Los Ojos is a nonprofit that about 10 years ago we put together to acquire lands along the migratory corridors and to restore wetlands. So I'm going to talk about my experiences restoring wetlands. I'm not a hydrologist or a geologist, so I'm just going to talk about a naive person coming from New York City with no former training, how this all came about. The first thing, when I got to Arizona, in the Chiricahua Mountains, I was terrified, because the first summer was a summer of monsoon season, and I saw the monsoons destroying nature because it looked like all the dirt and all the rainwater from the mountains were sliding down and coming at the same time and taking trees out and moving big boulders. And I thought, ugh, nature is destroying itself. That isn't natural. And the neighbor said, yes, it's always that way every year. The rains come and 2 months later it's dry and that's the end of it. But I looked into the situation. I went up the mountains and I saw huge trunks of trees that had been cut down, the stumps of them. This used to be giants, trees here. And then I saw grasses that were just gone from the top of the mountains and bare rock. And that's where there was a lot of erosion, gullies on the side of the mountains. And I thought, this doesn't look so good. And then I learned that there had been 16 sawmills in the Chiricahuas to give fuel for the copper mines. And then I learned that they'd put up a lot of grasses had come in when there was no trees. The grasses came in and they put cattle and sheep on those mountains. And eventually the mountains lost the grasses. And eventually they were losing the soil too. So it was a very bad situation. This little example was my light bulb moment, because the sediment comes down and it hits the rocks and it stays wet there and grasses come up. I thought, why do we do this everywhere? And my husband at the time, Joe Austin, he knew more about it because he grew up on a farm and he knew nature and it was more familiar to him. He said, yeah, that's a good idea. We should try it. So we started doing it. This is the kind of erosion that we saw. So throughout the hills. And so the next one, this is what we did. So we start way at the top of the mountain and we use little rocks to put them together into making a little dam, and they call them trincheras. And then we go work our way down, and the bottom of one trinchera should be the top of the next dam, and it should go down in steps like that. Then you don't have erosion and you have putting the soil back. And it really works. It really works. And we put soil back on the mountain, which was the first thing, and the grasses came in relatively quickly because the water didn't erode from behind those structures, and the grasses flourished. And farther down, since all the water wasn't coming into the canyon at the same time now, it was infiltrating into the sides of the hills, and the hills were becoming sponges, we had an opportunity to do the river itself at the bottom. And here is a scene farther down where you see the water, 1, 2, 3 trincheras in their loose rock structures. So At the end of 20 years, we approximately 20,000. Each one of those dots is a GPS of and what happened was the hills were sponges. The river down below was started to run all year round, and there were always pools of water. When you had pools of water, then you started having insects in them. When you had insects, then you had birds. Then we had the animals came, the deer multiplied, the mountain lion multiplied. I mean, the whole system. Trees were coming in the bottom, and the hills were being sponges. Then we decided there was a stream in Mexico, the Cajon Bonito, that had 8 species of native fish. And I'm particularly fond of native fish. And so we went down and looked, and we decided that that would be a good property to start in Mexico. So Cuenca Los Ojos is now the manager of a large, I'd say about 130 or 40,000 acres of land from the toppest mountain to the deep canyons to the valleys. And we manage land for wildlife, and this land is being used to experiment on how to capture water. Now, it's pretty hard because this is what we're dealing with. We're no longer at the beginning of a system, we're in the middle of a system. And that's very difficult to do. You want to start at the top and work your way down. You don't want to start in the middle. So we were pretty mystified about what we could do. Wait a minute, there was supposed to be another slide that I wanted to put. Hold on, I'm going to flip around. I don't know where it is. It didn't come on. But there was a slide that I wanted to show you about a success in one of these places. So what we did was we started with an arroyo that was smaller, a little wash on the east, and that was right below the refuge protected by Fish and Wildlife in the States, and they had put in some gabions. Gabions are wire baskets filled with rocks, and they put them in this little wash, and trees had come in, and they had stopped the flow, and they had increased the water. I really hope the slide comes up, but I guess you're not going to see it, because it showed the gabion holding and then the water down below, and we changed that little wash from a highway, which people used to drive up, hidden. You couldn't see them. They were 20 feet down. Couldn't see them, drive up to the States and then disappear in the States. And we changed that from a highway to a jungle. It was so packed with vegetation and so packed with all kinds of grasses and trees and just tanglements that the water really stayed in there. And there was one event called Odile in 2008. The water from the bottom of the wash to the top was 26 feet. That's the amount of water that was coming over this. This is pretty big. And so that broke a lot of the gabions, pulled down the trees, but you have a cottonwood or you have, say, a willow. You pour, that willow goes down, there are 10 willows that come up. So in short order, it repaired itself and it dug in places, so there were deep parts and it deposited in other places. The fish loved it. The refuge manager said, Valera, this is wonderful. And the fish started going back up into the States where they hadn't been. So let's see. Then we had to do another wash that was coming through. Now I'm going to talk about some of my failures. Well, this isn't a failure yet. I'm going to go to the failure. Okay, what we did was we put in a very large berm, and we had a cement spillway to it. It was a big mistake. So I don't recommend that. I recommend going slower. I think it's useful to know some mistakes. So I think I would recommend going slower and doing it differently. And I'm going to show you some of the things why I think it will work still with gabions. This is a gabion, one of the ones that was in that creek that didn't blow out. And it's not very high. It's about a meter high, and it's probably 2 meters down and maybe 4 meters wide. But that collected enough silt behind it so that vegetation could come up. All those trees came up after we put this in, because the water was about, at this point, was about 8 feet underneath the ground because of all that sponge. So I do think it still works, and I'm going to show you. This was the blowout of the spillway. Bad idea. Okay, I'm going to show you some pictures from a stream down in Mexico, a different stream. But this happened last year. I just took these pictures this year. And the water formed their own, I would say, they're not gabions because it's not rocks and wire, but their own gabions out of lumber. And it flowed down and stopped. I want to show you a little video of what the next one is, a little video. You can see this is the river doing this, and this is very large. I mean, I can't begin to tell you how wide it is. And it backed water up and spread the water out, which is what we were trying to do with that big berm. But that big berm was just too much for the system to hold, and it broke the spillway and broke the berm. But I still think that we can use these ideas, and I think that looking at nature and being at least cognizant of what nature would try to do in a situation is the most important thing you can do. And I have a picture of here. Oh, we're going to see the video again. What? Well, we can see this. It's only 2 seconds. I'm so impressed with this. I want to show it again. Okay, now, the next picture. These were our predecessors in the Cajon. And I think that these people knew nature and respected nature. And I think what we did was sort of out of bounds when we put in that big structure. So I would recommend putting in structures in a low, and I'd recommend that you think first about vegetation. So I think it's a good idea because the trees did this themselves. I really like what they did. And I think covering the ground is the most important thing you can do. So those things are what I recommend. I have 5 minutes more. Well, I also want to say that I had no experience before. I mean, I came from New York City. Nobody in New York City came up to me and said, "How much rain did you get last night?" That just wasn't, so sometimes being a stranger in the land and nature so impressed me. I mean, that little rock and that little thing, that so impressed me. So I think looking at nature, taking some examples from it and being sensitive to the changes that are happening on the land are truly important tools.
I'm not sure. Can you hear me on this one? Okay. So we have some time for some questions, and I have a microphone set up here. If people want to come up, if you have a question for Valère, you can come up to the microphone. But I wanted to say in regard to that Hurricane Odile event that Valère was talking about, we were looking at that in real time, and that event was about a 1,000-year rain event, which looked like about a 100-year rain event on the ground. So despite the failures that Valère was talking about, it reduced the impact of the storm by 90% on the ground. Really interesting to think about that. Despite the failures, a lot of the vegetation that she was talking about maintained. So.
I want to add to that. I think in the future, we are going to have to think about 1,000-year events. So the only thing sure is that there will be change, and I think climate change is really serious. And I just want to talk about these two streams, because you have a caldera, and all the water is coming down from two mountains, and it's resting there in used to be a wetlands. By wetlands, I mean, you couldn't go swimming in it. I mean, it would be 6 inches of water and then land, and then 6 inches more. I mean, just for miles. And that's the most important wetlands, and we need to put them back, and that needs to be a high priority. Well, I'm so scared what's going to happen now is that with climate change, it's going to eat back up on both rivers, and they're going to both, so I really think Cuenca Los Ojos needs a lot of help. We need to put this back. And I'm excited that my daughter is taking on the reins, so we'll be around for a while. But I want to introduce you to Cuenca Los Ojos, not me. I'm bowing out. But I'll always be interested. Okay.